Good evening, everybody. It will probably take another 2 or 3 minutes until Shwen, who is our host, will join. And then we will start with 30 minutes of Zazen, and after that, this week I will talk about the precious mirror Samadhi. So let's wait for a couple of minutes and then let's sit together. Are there any questions you would like to ask before we start to sit? Nothing?
I'll just say I'm glad to be back. Oh, hisashiburi desu.
Ah, it's nice to see you back.
Sorry for the absence.
And if there's anybody here who's sitting Zazen for the first time, usually I don't give any Zazen instructions, but you can find them on my English channel. Just a couple of days ago I did an English workshop and I uploaded the Zazen instruction part of that. So if you're not familiar with the technical aspect of sitting, or the question what to do with my mind, I can't calm down 30 minutes, my mind doesn't empty. Many people have this idea that we're supposed to sit with an empty mind, but it doesn't work. So if those are questions that, how do you say, keep you busy, you might want to watch one of these older videos. Okay, Shwen-san is a little bit late today, but maybe we don't have to wait for her. So I'm gonna also prepare myself for the sitting, and in a minute or so we will start with Zazen. So, thank you for joining. Today I want to talk about the Hokyo Zammai, the precious mirror Samadhi again. Let me share the screen with you. You always find the whole Chinese text with English translation in the video description of both this video after I upload it, but also in the past versions. But right now I will share it with you. I will skip the first part of the text, otherwise it will become too long. Let's start with this line. In darkest night, it is perfectly clear. In the light of dawn, it is hidden. And I explained that this is the first of the so-called 5 ranks. The first one in Japanese, shochu-hen, is the relative inside the absolute, or the contingent inside the essential. The dark of night would stand for the absolute. There's no divisions. But then when the light comes up and you see the relative, the absolute disappears. But actually in this rank it talks about this, that these two are inseparable and that the relative appears inside the absolute. Or to use another metaphor that I used 2 weeks ago, Indra's net. We are all like drops on one huge universal net. And the absolute, no, the relative inside the absolute would be like asking the question, but where is this net? Where is the net? Where does the net manifest? It manifests in one big drop. The drop of the one consciousness that is listening to my voice right now. That would be the relative inside the absolute, the net inside the drop. It is a standard for all things. Its use removes all suffering. Although it is not constructed, it is beyond words. And here comes the second rank. Like facing a precious mirror, form and reflection behold each other. You are not it, but in truth it is you. So the second rank, that would be this one, henshu sho, inside the relative, the absolute, inside the contingent, there's the essential. 2 weeks ago I talked about this in detail. In the morning you get up and you look in the mirror. What do you see there? Oh, your own face. But actually that part of yourself that's doing the seeing, the one consciousness that I talked about, and that what you see in the mirror are completely different. To use another metaphor that's often used, what you see in the mirror is just an actor on the screen. But the seeing takes place on the whole screen. So there are 2 very different aspects of myself. Me as the screen, me as the drop, and me as an actor on the screen, me as a part, a very small part of the net that is reflected inside the drop. So am I the one drop that contains the net, or am I just a very small drop inside the net? And the answer here would be both, actually both. What you see in the mirror is not you, but actually that is you. So not only does the net appear inside the drop, but the net also contains all of the drops, and that's another step that I emphasized 2 weeks ago. That means that the same is true for everything I see in the mirror or when I look at the screen. All of you are also manifestations of the one drop. So all of you also contain the whole universe. Or talking about time, and I said that also in the past, you could say that time only exists in the now. That would be the first rank, the relative inside the absolute. There is only the now, and the whole of past, present and future is part of the now. But then that's the second rank. Every day is a fine day. The same is true for yesterday, today, tomorrow. Each day is the only now. Each point of time is the only real now. And now comes the third rank. Like a newborn child, it is fully endowed with 5 aspects. No going, no coming, no arising, no abiding. Popo han han. I don't know if that's the real Chinese pronunciation, but here it says Popo han han. In Japanese you say baba baba. Popo han han is anything said or not. The third rank in Japanese is read Sho Chu Lai. Sho is the absolute, the essential, in the middle. And this character means coming. Usually this is interpreted as coming out of the absolute. Coming out of the absolute. Interestingly, Bolleter, whose work is very interesting, and I will also share a part of his work soon. For interestingly, Bolleter doesn't interpret this as coming out of the absolute, but the other way around, arriving inside the absolute. So the movement is different. One thing that I have difficulties with, and I talked about that also a number of times, is the question, why is there 5 ranks? In the Heart Sutra it says, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. That seems to already cover it. Why do we need 5? And one possible answer is the first 2 ranks express form is emptiness, emptiness is form. But that's kind of static. The next 2 express a movement. The movement in between. Form is emptiness and the emptiness is form. And this movement here would be the movement back towards the absolute. Or using the metaphor of the net, we understand that inside that one drop, a net manifests with millions, billions of drops in it. That's the first. Second, we also understand that each of these millions and billions of drops also contains the whole net. And now there would be a movement back to that one drop. So the third stage is a movement back to that one drop that we started with. Back to that one consciousness that's listening to Muho's voice right at this one, precise this one moment, the only moment in time. And that's in a way returning to the state that we had when we were small babies, before we could speak. Our eyes were open, we were seeing the world full of wonder, we were listening to sounds, but we didn't grasp them with concepts yet. It's the state where you didn't divide yet. You didn't even divide between you and the world. That's this baby state, the newborn child. It is fully endowed with the 5 aspects. And I think 5 aspects means our 5 senses here. No going, no coming, no arising, no abiding almost sounds as if it was a line from the Heart Sutra. In the Heart Sutra we have similar lines, and basically this refers to emptiness, the absolute. The absolute is not born and it doesn't die, just as with the now. It's not that when it's midnight, a new now appears. We always live in the now. There's no end to the now. There's no beginning to the now. Baba baba in Japanese, popo han han, those are the sounds that a baby make. The baby doesn't talk about the Buddha Dharma, but still the baby teaches the Buddha Dharma 24 hours a day. How does the baby teach the Buddha Dharma? By making sounds like baba baba, mama, papa. That's the way a baby teaches Buddha Dharma. And it's only adult people that talk about the Dharma, but when you talk about it, you already separate yourself from it. So here, the third stand, that's where there's no separation. You're inside the Absolute. You cannot name it. Is anything said or not? What does the baby want to tell us? What could the baby possibly try to express by making these sounds? Baba baba. In the end, it says nothing, for the words are not yet right. And now let me share a portion of the book by Ross Bolleter. The third of the 5 positions of ruler and minister. And again, these are also attributed to Tozan or Chinese Dungshan. The third one, as I said, arriving within the essential. And the classic interpretation that I have heard about in Japanese, the movement is the opposite, coming out of the essential. But whatever, Bolleter says, arriving within the essential. In nothingness, there's a road apart from the dust. And the dust here is the relative, the manifold, or time. There's a time and a space that's separate from that. Where is this time? Where's the space? You all know the answer. It's the famous here and now. That's the road apart from the dust. If you don't break the taboo on mentioning the emperor's name, you will surpass the eloquence of the previous dynasties' worthies who cut off tongues. So in the text of the Hokyo Zammai, it talks about a baby that doesn't speak yet. Here in this other text, we hear about the taboo to mention the emperor's name. I don't know how it was in ancient China, but even today in Japan, you have an emperor, but usually you don't mention the emperor's name. When you have to refer to the emperor, usually you refer to the, how do you say, name of the period where he reigned. So right now we are in the 7th year of Reiwa. So you would say the Reiwa Tenno, the Reiwa emperor, and before that it was Heisei, and before that it was Showa. So you say the Showa emperor, the Heisei emperor, the Reiwa emperor, but actually that's not the name. They have a name, but it would be considered kind of impolite to call them by their name, and in the old times it would be a taboo. You could have, how do you say, received, how do you say, capital punishment. You have lost your life if you called the emperor by his name. So it was a taboo. And basically the metaphor here is the thing that we talk about, the thing that the text starts with, Nyose no Ho, that one Dharma of suchness. The Dharma of thusness is intimately transmitted by Buddhas and ancestors. Actually, there's no name for this Dharma. You cannot call it by a name. When you call it with a name, you already lose it because you make a concept out of it. And the same is true in Christianity for God. We have a name, well, we have this word, but the moment we use the word, actually, we already lose contact with God. And the same is true with about this Dharma of thusness, or the here and now. I call it the here and now, but actually even here and now is not a good concept, because you think it's separate from yesterday or tomorrow. It's separate from somewhere else, but it's not separate from anything. Okay, that is the third rank. In a way, it's the state of a newborn baby that doesn't separate yet, but the five senses are working 100%. It's seeing the world with fresh eyes, listening to the sounds, feeling its body. It's crying when it's thirsty, but it has no words to express itself, and at the same time everything this baby says is an expression of this state. Okay, so much from my side for today. If you have questions or anything you would like to share, please feel welcome to do so. Either raise your hand or start to talk like that.
I'll start then. I'll sing as I'm
Okay.
back, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Yes, I was thinking you were saying about, if we use a word, if we say the Dharma or Buddha nature, you've already lost it. But would you agree it's also true of ourselves, isn't it? As soon as we label Julian or Muha or Joseph, we've lost that kind of that view of the whole net, and you're kind of falling into the drop. And I remember, sorry, Joe, I remember when Joe was born a little while ago, that huge openness in his eyes as he came into the world, and that sense of just being not falling into that story that we end up telling about ourselves. So I think it's applicable to, us as individuals as well, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, this question, net or drop, which comes first, is the same question as was there an egg first or was there a hen first? So it doesn't really matter which we call which, but I was a little bit surprised when you said something like we forget the net and drop back into the drop thing when we identify with the name. Because from my perspective, it would be the other way around. When we look at the net, we are all connected, but each of the drops there has a different name tag. But this one drop that we start with doesn't have a name yet. So I would actually have put it the other way around. When I identify with my name, I identify with one drop on the net, but I take the net perspective.
Yeah, I think that's what I meant. And
okay.
But I think that's what's interesting about this sense of the five ranks is that adding the movement, isn't it? The coming and going from the relative to the absolute, from I to the net and back. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. And in this book that I've been referring to a number of times, it's a German translation of talks by Hisamatsu. The calligraphy that he has for the third is mu, emptiness, basically. And so when you live in a Zen monastery, in a Rinzai monastery especially, and you work with koans, one of the first ones is this question, does a dog have Buddha nature or not? And Joshu's answer was nothing. No Buddha nature at all. And basically the answer, or this koan, tries to get you to this third rank, returning to the state where concepts like Buddha nature didn't have a meaning to you yet. Returning to the state, to a state of a newborn baby. And now please explain. Actually, that's one of the follow-up koans. How do you explain mu to a newborn baby? How do you explain Buddha nature to a newborn baby? That's one of the follow-up questions. But basically, the third rank is about returning to the state where the concept of Buddha nature didn't make any sense to you at all. Any other questions? Anything else you would like to share?
May I comment on this quickly?
Yes, please.
I've been thinking about this koan that you just mentioned for many years, and only recently I found out. So during that time of thinking, I always thought that something wasn't quite right about it, like mu and what's about it. And only recently I found out that originally in ancient Chinese, the same character, the same kanji was pronounced not mu as it sounds now in Japanese, but wu. And it resembles the sound of a dog barking. And when you think from this perspective, it adds the whole new level to the overall picture that this koan creates. That was what I wanted to add to the discussion.
Yes, thank you. But don't teach too much, otherwise some people might think they understand the answer. And I mean, there's of course lots of, I mean, that's why we have these 5 ranks. There's at least 5 different aspects from which you can approach this koan. And what you just said, to approach from the direction of, well, what could be the Buddha nature of a dog? That's one of the approaches. It's not the traditional approach here in Japan, but it's one possible approach. How does a dog teach Buddha nature? And actually, that's not the traditional answer to the koan as I practice it, but it's the approach that you follow with other koans. Like with other koans, that would be exactly the approach to take. Any other things you would like to ask or share? Could animals also be a description of the third rank then? And if so, how does that fit into traditional Buddhist concept of the animal realm? Some people say that. I mean, some people say that cats and dogs and other animals, they don't have this conceptual thinking that we have. And if the problem is the conceptual thinking, then it's all about returning to the state before we started to conceptualize. On the other hand, as you know, the human realm in Buddhism is the second from the top. Our aim is not to get to the top, but our aim is to basically reach nirvana. But the animals are 4th place, so to speak. So in Buddhism, you would teach that animals still have a long way to go. They first need to be reborn in the human realm, and after that, they need to attain nirvana. But then again, the most Zen practitioners I know, including myself, they don't take that too literal. So the question, is a dog already enlightened? Or am I, as a human being, much closer to enlightened than the dog? To me, the question is not so interesting because I'm not a dog. If I was a dog, maybe. But probably a dog doesn't ask himself the question. So in that way you could say the dog is already enlightened, or he is so deluded that he can't even ask the question. But I think the question for us humans is, how do we manifest Buddha nature with this dividing, conceptualizing mind that we have as human beings? And if we're better than dogs and cats or worse than dogs and cats, I think is a less interesting question. So how do dogs bark in Chinese, Xuan? What's the sound in Chinese?
We say wang 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 wang.
Ah, like in Japanese. Yeah,
Yeah.
in Japanese also dogs bark one. But yeah, what Gleb just says, that the woo sounds very close to a dog bark. I heard that from a number of people. But again, it's not the traditional answer that a Japanese Roshi would want to hear from you. Which doesn't mean that it's a bad answer. Any other things that you would like to share or ask?
Yes, hello. About the Wu or Mu, some years ago I read, I think it was Wikipedia, but I forgot English or the German Wikipedia, that it's sometimes translated as beyond yes or no. Like neither yes nor no. Weder noch in German. Weder noch. Is this right? Or it made sense to me somehow, because like if you say no, you are in the dualistic world. If you say yes or no, this is dualistic. But if Wu or Mu means neither yes nor no, then it helps you maybe to get beyond the dualistic understanding.
So the koan, basically the question of the monk to Joshu was, how about the Buddha nature of a dog? Is it there or is it not there? And there the characters for U and Mu appear. U means to be and Mu means to not be, or yes and no. Basically the question is, how about Buddha nature in a dog, yes or no? And Joshu's answer is Mu. So on the surface, he's choosing one side of a dualistic option. He has two options, he's choosing one, Mu. No Buddha nature. But of course, what you say is also true, and that's a point that people often make. The Mu, when we use it in a Zen context, is not one half of a dualism, but it's absolute Mu. There's no outside of Mu. In a way, the drop that I talked about, this one drop, and there's nothing outside of the drop. The now, the here and now, that's Mu. Mu and the here and now are one and the same. It's not one half of a dichotomy. It's not an either or. There's only Mu. There's only Mu. But as soon as you or I say this and we think we understand it, we already make it into a concept. And actually, this concept of something being absolute is already dualistic. Because what I just explained is there's a dualistic Mu, a superficial Mu, that's also only one part of a dualism. And then there's the real Mu, the absolute Mu. But by making this explanation, I already separate the absolute Mu, the good Mu, the real Mu, the Zen Mu, from the superficial Mu, the everyday Mu, the Mu of normal people. But the whole point is to not make this separation. So again, it's like a baby speaking. It's not difficult, but actually words cannot reach this Mu. The moment you talk about it, you separate yourself from it. But all we say and all we do is part of Mu. So We are never separate from it, but the moment we try to grasp it, we step, how do you say, aside, so to speak. We fall into a trap. Anything else you would like to ask or share? If not, as it's already a couple of minutes past 9 here in Japan, I would like to thank Xuan-san for hosting us as every week. I would also like to thank all of you for coming here. Next week, I'm going to be back here and talk about Sawaki Roshi's quotes to you. And in 2 weeks, probably I will talk about the hexagram. There's a very complicated line that talks about double fire, and that's a reference to the I Ching, an old Chinese text. And I will try to make sense of that, again, with the help of Ross Bolleter. So thank you very much for joining. Have a nice week. See you again, if you like, next week, next Monday. Same time, same address, same password. See you. Bye.
Bye.